In a pre-New Year diplomatic peace push, U.S. President Donald Trump met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Florida on Sunday. Now, this meeting came just a day after Russia launched fresh attacks on residential areas of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. Now, Trump, who had promised a peace deal on day one of his nearly year-old presidency, said it would become clear within weeks whether it was possible to end the war that has killed tens of thousands of people since February of 2022. Now, despite projecting optimism, Trump offered few details on real progress, instead criticizing former U.S. President Joe Biden's multi-billion-dollar military support to Ukraine and highlighting his own personal rapport with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
We had a terrific meeting. We discussed a lot of things. As you know, I had an excellent phone call with President Putin that lasted for over 2 hours. We discussed a lot of points, and I do think we're getting a lot closer, maybe very close. Russia wants to see Ukraine succeed. Once, it sounds a little strange, but I was explaining to the president, President Putin was very generous in his feeling toward Ukraine succeeding, including supplying energy, electricity, and other things at very low prices.
Trump admitted that Kyiv and Moscow remain divided, mainly on territorial control. The latest proposal, shaped after weeks of intense U.S.-Ukraine talks, would freeze the war along current front lines in eastern Donbas with a demilitarized buffer zone. Russia, however, continues to demand territorial concessions.
Mr. President, have you agreed on the so-called free trade zone on Donbas? How to separate the sites? How to make the separation line? Who will be responsible?
The word agreed is too strong. I would say not agreed, but we're getting closer to an agreement on that, and that's a big issue. Certainly, that's one of the big issues, and I think we're closer than we were probably. It's unresolved, but it's getting a lot closer. That's a very tough issue, but one that I think will get resolved.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, along with several European leaders, took to social media on Sunday to thank U.S. President Donald Trump and welcome what they described as progress in peace talks aimed at ending Russia's war in Ukraine. According to reports, Russian President Vladimir Putin told Trump during a telephone call earlier in the day that a proposed 60-day ceasefire backed by the European Union and Ukraine would only prolong the conflict. Meanwhile, Zelensky maintained a noticeably cautious and courteous tone during his visit to Florida on Sunday. The Ukrainian leader appeared keen to avoid a repeat of his contentious White House meeting on February 28th, when Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance publicly criticized him for a lack of gratitude for U.S. support. Staying with this story, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney on Saturday announced an additional $2.5 billion in economic assistance for Ukraine. Prime Minister Mark Carney said the aid would help Ukraine unlock further financing from the International Monetary Fund. He was speaking alongside Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who also briefly addressed reporters. Zelensky met Carney while en route to the United States for talks with President Donald Trump in Florida and expressed hope to find a compromise on a peace framework to end Russia's war. Listen in.
Under President Zelensky's leadership, we have the conditions, the possibility of a just and lasting peace. But that requires a willing Russia. And the barbarism that we saw overnight, the attack on Kyiv, shows just how important it is that we stand with Ukraine during this difficult time, and that we create the conditions for this just and lasting peace and a true reconstruction. We're announcing today further economic assistance for Ukraine, $2.5 billion worth of economic assistance that helps unlock financing from the IMF, from the World Bank, from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, to begin this process of rebuilding.
This attack is, again, Russia's answer on our peace efforts, and it's really shows that Putin doesn't want peace, and we want peace. And he the man of war, but he afraid to speak about publicly. But we see the steps, and what we need to stop this war in any way. And we need two things: pressure on Russia and sufficient strong support for Ukraine.